Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Techie is In. I'm Susan Shangle, and I'm really excited to be here with you today because we're taking on one of my favorite technology tangles. It's email. We have more email than we know what to do with. And though it was invented back in the 90s and we've all been dealing with it for a couple of decades, I have to tell you, we haven't made a lot of progress. And in today's episode, we're going to explore a few different ways that you can hopefully tame this email monster. Let's just back up a little bit and figure out how we got ourselves into this mess. And for those of you that are watching, you'll see a poll if you're in on our regular interface over on the right-hand side where you can vote and share your dirty little secret. How many unopened emails are in your inbox right now? And I'll let you all take a listen at that. And for those of you that need to watch us live, you'll find the link in both the sticky notes on the chat as well as in the event thread if you're tuning in from Google Hangouts. Now, back to the topic that I'm so darn excited about, email, and what are we going to do about this? So, if you think about it, email originally, came around. I think my first account was with AOL. You've got mail. And those were thrilling words. We were so excited to have something come in this new electronic format. That thrill soon died, in part because of two reasons. One, no one had a really good handle on how to talk to each other via email, how to distribute email, how should we go about that? And then, of course, we got the marketing people involved, aka the spammers. People figured out pretty early on that all the get rich quick, lose weight, Viagra ads could reach a much wider audience if I could get into your inbox. And so for a while there, things were pretty crazy. I think I read a stat once that there was actually more spam being sent than real email in the early days. Regardless, it's mostly predominantly still used as the main form of business communication. And when we moved from a world of paper memos, if you remember those or worked in an office job, for most of us, it might have been just a notice on the luncheon board in the lunchroom that something was happening in the company. And now everyone needs to tell everybody everything. And unfortunately, a lot of people adopted a cover your butt attitude towards email. If I send it to every single person in the company, then I can't get in trouble for it. And not a good plan. And so we ended up with inboxes full of a wide variety of things we want, things we don't want, sometimes things we ask for, and a lot of times buried in that big pile of stuff was something really important. In addition, there's been changes to the technology over the years. We didn't have mobile email when it first started, and now many of us are accessing our email on desktops, laptops, tablets, phones, kiosks in hotels when we're traveling. There's a whole bunch of different ways to get to those important email messages. And you can see by the plethora of products that people have invented to help us with the inbox problem that it's a well-known one, but not one that's really been solved. So today we're going to talk about a couple of the different issues and ways that email is managed and delivered. We're going to take an audience question about filtering and controlling the amount of email that we get and how to organize it. And then I'll share with you my little gotcha. If you're running a business, do not be guilty of this major, major mistake. So stay tuned in and we'll get right to those things. First, I'd like to just take a moment. I'm going to take a quick minute and look at the poll and see how we're doing for the amount of people and the email situation. Okay. Not too many people have weighed in yet, which means I'm thinking I have more of my Google people watching directly from the Hangouts than I do logged into the show interface. So that's okay. Totally cool. I'm going to guess that most of you have at least 100 unread emails in your inbox at the moment. So first of all, let's talk about email protocols. In the early days, there was only one way to get email, and that's known as POP. Yes, like soda, POP, P-O-P. And it's the way that the email is accessed. So what would happen is you would have some sort of piece of software, and it would log in to the server, which is where your email lives. So if I sent you a message, it went to the email server. Now, who owned this server? This server could have been Yahoo. It could have been Microsoft Hotmail. It could have been, not in the early days, but now it could be Gmail, or it could be your ISP or AOL or whatever other service you were using to access the internet probably gave you a complimentary inbox when you signed up. For example, here in New Zealand, our big service provider is their email service. They went with Yahoo, and all the addresses end in extra.co.nz. So that's the service. And when you signed up for an account, they gave you a free email address. So your email piece of software would go and it would say, hey, server, are there any messages for Susan? And the server would say, yep, here they are. And it would actually turn over the messages to the client file, and it would delete them from the server, and they were gone. And that used to cause a whole bunch of problems. If you lost your device or your hardware failed, there was no backup of those messages. And the reason it was like that in the early days is because storage was really still very expensive, and the service providers didn't want you storing all your email up on their server because that cost them money. So they would send it to your machine, and then what you did with it after that was great. And that made a whole bunch of problems. Luckily, that's mostly gone. And shortly thereafter, there was a little box you could tick that said, leave messages on the server. And that's what a lot of us used to do in the early days. If we had, for example, two different computers, if you had a laptop and a desktop, you could leave messages on the server, and then the client software, the piece of software you were using on your machine to read the email, such as Outlook, which was probably the most popular one in the beginning, or another very popular one was Opera, and another one was Thunderbird. So whatever client you were using to read this email could leave the message on the server so that another client could still pick it up, and at least they weren't deleted. That was a big step forward. And then as companies started to roll out, they wanted the assets stored on a server where they had control over them. So if an employee left, those emails didn't disappear. And we started to move into a new protocol, which is known as IMAP, I-M-A-P. So we had POP, and now we've got IMAP. And I won't bore you with what the acronyms stand for. Google will give you an answer to that right away. It's one's a protocol and one's a message exchange protocol. Anyways, so IMAP was a lot smarter, and IMAP would keep track of which different devices had read the different messages, and therefore you wouldn't see unread messages twice. And when you sent something, it was sent from a central location. And as we moved to mobile, and a lot of people got their first phones, that was their big frustration. They would log into their account on one device and send a message, but when they went to their desktop, for example, the message they sent from the phone was not in the sent box as being sent, because again, they weren't synchronized, because most people in the beginning were using the old POP protocol instead of moving over to the newer, more robust IMAP protocol. So if you still suffer from that problem, that is the beginning of your solution to your email mess and having to read things twice and mark them twice and not being able to find them, is to get off of POP, get onto IMAP, and that will resolve a lot of your issues. Now, if you run your own company and you have private web hosting, that may or may not be something that your company will charge you extra for. Piece of advice: if they're charging you extra for IMAP email, it's trying to look for a new email hosting service. That's all I've got to say. And if you need help with that, you know where to reach me. Okay, so now we've got our two protocols. We can have messages delivered, in which case they disappear from the server, or we now have this beautiful system where messages are synchronized, they live on the server, and all my different devices know where they've read it or not and can see all the different messages that I've sent. And that's been a huge step forward. So now that we've figured out how our mail is getting delivered, let's take a look at what happens with it once it ends up in that inbox. There are essentially three different sorts of inboxes. Let's start with one you're probably really familiar with, and that would be your Gmail inbox. Gmail, the new Outlook.com, which used to be Hotmail, And other services like you might have in your ISP, if you have a Time Warner address or you have a Comcast address, these are the email servers that you will be dealing with. And you may go to a particular site and you may log in to that site to see your email. And I'm going to call those online services. Even though all your email is essentially online, let's just call those the online services. The second way you could be reading your email is you could be using, as I mentioned earlier, what we would call an email client, or a piece of software designed to handle the reading and sending of email. The most common one is probably Outlook, Apple Mail, Thunderbird, or Opera. I personally am a huge fan of Thunderbird. Why, you might ask? Because it's open source, it's free, and it's very, very robust. And I've been using it for over a decade now, and I think it's just wonderful. It allows me to do a couple of really key things. When I have an online service, the problem is if I want to read Gmail and then I want to read Outlook Mail and then I want to read Comcast Mail, well, guess what? I have to go to 3 different places. Now, there are some ninja tricks where you could read it all in one of those services, but I'll tell you what I observe with most people is they're logging into each different service to pick up their email, instead of having one combined central location to go to email in a batch. So we've got the email software, and that allows us to do a few things that we might not be able to do in the online version. I'll give you a really good example for me. I have multiple Gmail accounts, and when I'm in Gmail, I cannot sort those emails. I can only search, but I can't sort, and I really like to see my emails sorted by date. It's huge, it's important for me, it's easy for me. And so when I use this other piece of client software to read my Gmail account, it allows me to do things with that set of email that I cannot do oftentimes within the Gmail environment, or I can't do it easily. So that's a step towards that. And then the last way of collecting your email is that a lot of people aren't aware of is if you have a private site, like I have Suzation.com or netfatuation.com, there's emails for each of those as well that you can read from anywhere in the world. So I always just like people to know that. Let's say you're traveling, you've got everything on your phone, and oh my goodness gracious, your phone gets lost. Well, how would you get back to those reservations and other things if you could find a public computer and they're sent to your domain? In other words, for me, netfatuation.com, I could log in from anywhere in the world and still access those servers if I'm set up with IMAP and all my messages are still there. So that's kind of a run through the different scenarios. And then the third place is you might have a mobile client to read email on your phone. And the joy, again, of having a client reading multiple accounts is that you only have to go to one place to get your email. You don't have to go in and out. So a couple of examples of mobile clients is I use on Android a product called K-9. K9 has a little dog as a logo that's really quite robust. There is Cloudflare. There's Inbox, which is the new Google release for mobile email. That's quite lovely. Or you could just read it in regular Gmail. So a bunch of different choices. Picking clients is a whole different thing, but understand that you're not stuck with just what Comcast gave you or Outlook gave you. If you're not happy with the way it looks online, you can use a piece of software for free to read and organize your email. Okay, so that's taken care of. Now let's talk about the key of successful inbox, and that is having a rule to process your inbox. That means when you get an email, if it takes less than 2 minutes, do it. If it's not for you, delegate it. If you don't want it, delete it. I gotta tell you, you're not going to read it later. You're fooling yourself. You're not going to read it later. Just delete it. Get it out of there. And fourth is to put it in a safe place or archive it. And you could either send that to a third-party piece of software like Evernote. So that's deal with it. In other words, to put it in a filing cabinet, to archive it, to get it out of your inbox and into a safe place where it can be retrieved if necessary. but that you don't need to necessarily do anything about it afterwards. So we're going to go to the screen sharing portion so I can answer the question about filtering email. And it looks like I have so much to say on this topic. If you guys are interested, please let me know in the thread or after the show. And I think we might need a part 2 to this email series. There's a few more things I'd like to share on your way to having a wonderfully clean, organized inbox. And I do want to get to Karen's question and get to the filtering. So I'm going to look down for a minute while I share my screen, and then we'll take a look at how to filter your email. So 2 questions came in from the audience. One, if you're very active, and I'm using Google specifically as an example because I know many of you watching me right now are Google users of some ilk. And if you're active on Google Plus, for example, you may find that your inbox might be a little overwhelmed with notifications of all sorts. So when I got really active on Google Plus, that's the first thing I needed to get under control, which was to get a way to get those notifications out of my inbox. I do care, but I don't need them in my major workflow. And so that is a process known as writing a filter. And if we take a look at my screen, on the left-hand side, you'll notice that I do have quite a few unread messages, but they're only notifications. And if we go to that area, you will see all my notifications are instantly being pulled into a specific folder. And in Google, the way you make folders is by the use of something they call labels. And if you're using a third-party product, the great thing is you can build the folder in the third-party product, and then the labels are just built for you automatically in Google, in Gmail. So I have all my Hangouts go into one specific folder, and I have notifications personal, and then I have notifications business. And so that helps to keep my inbox relatively uncluttered. The way you would write a filter is something like this. I see that here I have a message from Judy Murray. And one of the things I can do is I can come in and I look at this and I can say, filter messages like these. And what that allows me to do is to instantly create a search and start to build a filter so that every time I get a message just like this, something can happen. So now that I have this open, I could further refine this if necessary, but I really just want all the messages from this person. I want a particular thing to happen to them. For those of you that don't know, this person is, I probably shouldn't be showing her email address all over the world, but hey mom, you might get a lot of email. Create a filter with this search. So then we go to the next part and it tells us, what do you want to have happen to the message? So the first thing I would want it to do is go into maybe skip the inbox. This is especially good for notifications that you don't really need to read, but that are going to come back anyways. You can mark it as read, star it, or pick a label to put it into a particular folder. So I'm going to put her into my family folder, which is a good place for your family. I don't need to, you can see you have a multiple bunch of choices that you can do here. And then you just say create filter. And at the same time, you can not only create it, but you can apply that filter to all of the messages. So just like that, I can now create a filter. And over on the right-hand side, we'll see if I scroll down here, excuse me, that's the left-hand side. I will someday figure out my other left and my other right. We see that here is my family group. And if I look in there, magically, all those messages are now safely stored in the family icon. So that's how you create a filter. That process of creating a filter. So basically you're going to make a search that tells your email program what to look for. And then you're going to tell it, once you find messages like this, what do you do with them? That's a filter, whether it's Outlook, Thunderbird, Gmail, your provider, everybody's got it. The other thing I wanted to take a quick moment to show you was the use of starring, because this is another thing that can be very helpful. You can star messages, but a lot of people don't know that there are actually multiple stars. So you can have little check marks, you can have question marks. And the way you activate these is through the settings in your Gmail, and then you can start to visually color code if you'd like your email. The other question that came in had to do with, I don't like all the tabs at the top, Susan. I don't want social promo. I just want an inbox. I don't care about these other things. So what you can actually do in Gmail, and this again was just an attempt of theirs to help us organize the categories of emails that we receive. And you notice right now I have social, I have promotions, I've already cleared my updates this morning, and I have forums. And you can control that from your settings, and there's a lovely little choice right here called Configure Inbox. And when you configure your inbox, you can say, I don't want those. And when you save it and then refresh, you should see that they are all gone. And now you are down to one easy inbox. So I had a bunch more to share, but I'm looking at the clock and I see our time together is up once again today. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. I hope you found it useful, that you have a takeaway to help make your life a little bit easier. And I will look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Have a fabulous day, and thanks to everyone. Please know the Techie is here for you, is here for your questions to help you enjoy embracing technology in your life. See y'all next week.